For this configuration, we have a bigger kit. It's more like a 70s rock kit, sort of in the vibe of John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. We have 4 mics instead of 2 mics this time because we're recording an Apogee Quartet. To start with, I'm actually using a system that I've read about that a friend of mine, Glenn Johns, used to use in the 60s and the 70s for Led Zeppelin and The Who and the Rolling Stones and people like that. And he was one of those guys that when I was a kid, I wanted to be him, or I wanted to meet him, and I wanted to understand what he did. And back then I had no clue, but in later days I found out that this is something like, it's probably not exactly what he did, but he would use 2 Neumann large diaphragm condenser microphones. These are U87s. And I've actually measured the distance between the diaphragm and the rack tom. It's 31 inches from there to there, and it's also 31 inches between the left one and the floor tom-tom. And it's also an equidistant between the cymbals too, between this ride cymbal. So this mic over here picks up the ride, and the floor tom, this picks up the cymbal, and the rack tom. Now the difference between what we're doing and what Glenn and Andy Johns and all those guys used to do in the old days is that I've actually added a snare mic. They didn't use a snare mic. And we have 4 channels, so instead of just 3 mics, I figured, well, I'll use a snare mic. And it's just a Shure 57, just kind of a standard snare mic that a lot of people use. Now in the bass drum, he actually has a mic installed inside the bass drum. It's an AKG D112. And it's just hanging down from this little device here, right in the middle. We also put a Mojave microphone. This is actually a handmade Mojave microphone that David Royer made. This is sort of one of the prototypes. I ended up preferring the sound of the internal mic because it had more attack on it. They both sound very good. The ideal thing would probably be to be able to use both, but of course we only have 4 channels, so I'm opting for the internal mic.
Did a John Bonham inspired type of groove. We're using a 70s 3-ply maple Ludwig kit, which was what Bonham played. We have the double-headed kick drum with no hole. There's a little bit of foam in here, muffling both the front and the back head with the rock on it. You can do that, you can put a pillow in there. Bonham used felt strips if you wanted to get really geeky. And we have a Ludwig Black Beauty 6.5 inch from the same era. With these 70s Ludwigs, they like to be pitched up a little bit more. They just sound great like that. Generally, to get this kind of tone, for the toms especially, you kind of want them a little higher pitched, no muffling, maybe minimal, like there's a little piece here on the floor tom which helps sometimes. But the top and bottom heads are generally pitched around the same, maybe a little higher on the bottom. Definitely a little higher than you would think, and wide open. And the kick drum, you know, equally about the same. You know, you can experiment with having the front head lower than this head or cranking it up. It's just, you know, you're at the mercy of the acoustics in the room too. Because some rooms, like on the stage, it enhances low end. But if you're in certain rooms, there might be like a weird thing going on. So you might have to fuss more with the drums. And the hi-hat thing with him, it definitely wasn't as loud as, like, you know, modern hi-hats are so loud. So, you know, if you're gonna try to do the Bonham thing with the minimal miking and this kind of configuration, you might wanna find thinner hi-hats or tape up the ones you have so they're not overpowering.
They're loud, big drums, and so it helps a lot, especially to overpower the cymbals. Because as Matt explained, you really, with only mics above the drums, no mics right on the tom-toms, you don't want the cymbals to be too loud. You don't want to hit them too hard because they'll just overpower everything. The 4-mic technique was really taken from the old 60s technique that Glenn Johns pioneered, where he used to use 3 mics. He used the bass drum mic and 2 U87s or maybe 2 U67s, 2 large diaphragm condensers. I don't know exactly which mics. And then, of course, I added the snare just to make it a little bit more modern, so you could just get a bit more snare drum. I mean, I've mixed a few things that he recorded on a Stones album called Tattoo You, in the old days, and I ended up having to do some sort of I wanted to get more snare because it was recorded with that technique, and so I did like a gating trick to get the snare to actually pop out a little bit more. And so it's actually nice to have a snare track, I think. And I think even Glenn nowadays, I hate to speak for him, but I have a feeling he probably uses a snare mic now.